Yeah. She's ready.
Okay. Hello, everyone. I think we're ready to get started. Welcome to the New Mexico Family Advocacy Program's 7th ECHO session. NMFAP is a model of parent representation being implemented in the 13th and 2nd Judicial Districts that utilizes an interdisciplinary team of lawyers, social workers, and parent mentors working effectively together to provide quality representation in the court system so that our families are given the proper advocacy and support for reunification or other preferred outcomes. As participants in our community of practice, you'll receive professional development from experts and early adopters of the NMFAP model, learn best practices, and collaborate to solve complex issues that present challenges to providing quality parent representation in the court system. So welcome, my name is Leslie Jones. I am one of the lead attorneys for the program and was one of the attorneys in the pilot project. And so to my right here.
Hi, everybody. I'm Jennifer Vieira. I work for AOC and the New Mexico Family Advocacy Program. I'm here as your tech support for today. Just want to remind everybody to press *6 to mute or unmute yourself as you ask questions. And please announce yourself. If you're just calling in with just your phone number, please either rename yourself or identify yourself so that we know everybody's calling in. And also, if there's more than one person next to you on like either on camera or on the phone, please let us know all the participants in your room or sitting next to you. Thank you.
Thank you. Also with us from the program, we have.
I'm Caitlin Fior. I'm one of the lead social workers for the program.
Quiva Hubbard, parent mentor coordinator for the program.
A couple of things we ask you to please remember to complete a post-session feedback and reflection form. I'm going to ask Jen to put it up in the chat so that you have access to that and you hopefully can see it while you enter your name and your role into the chat box so that we can have that to know who was present. If you could please follow that link and complete the form. Funding for our professional learning through NMFAP ECHO comes from a federal grant. And so the surveys are really important for the program's broader evaluation and for continued funding. But I'd also like you to really consider signing up to do a case presentation for a future session. The link for those forms are also found in the invitation that you received to this session. And if you follow that link, you can submit that to to Jan and for us to then use in a future session. We really appreciate if you'd be willing to sign up and do that. So today, our session is how mental health issues manifest throughout the abuse and neglect case process. And our presenter today is Susan Burns. She is a licensed clinical social worker at the New Mexico School for the Deaf and a former field education coordinator. She earned a master's degree in social work in 1985 from Michigan State University. She's been a clinical social worker in various mental health agency settings and in private psychotherapy practice for 30 years. She was a New Mexico State University professor for advanced social work practice for 10 of those years. Susan was an important part of the initial collaboration to create our NM Family Advocacy Program and currently serves as the program social work consultant. So welcome, Susan.
Hi. Hi, good to be here. So I did a presentation several times ago. I think I was number 4 on the list. And it was from that presentation we saw further things to develop, which is why I'm here again. And I could be here again and again and again because this is a never-ending bunny trail of one thing leads to other things that are all interrelated. And so we'll always have things to talk about. So today, I modified to a slight degree the title of this presentation because I found, so I think the original one was something like recognizing mental health issues. And I realized in my many years of being a therapist, I could tell something wasn't exactly right, but I couldn't tell you what for quite a long time after you get to know a client. And so recognizing a mental health issue is not the same thing as feeling something I'm seeing doesn't feel right. And so that's why I have manifesting, how do the issues of mental health manifest through the process that you while you work with the client. So that's just a little explanation as to my position on that. So moving along, so they have access to that, right?
Yes.
The first couple slides are from the earlier presentation, and I've just included them for continuity's sake and just for some discussion for anybody who may not have been present on the 30th of April. It's there for your perusal. At that point, I talked about the delays, the realities of mental health, what are psychosocial concerns having to do with our problem. So here we are. So I'd like to talk today about the effects and consequences of dysregulating mental health and addiction concerns. That mental health and addiction, as well as other issues of non-wellness, cause dysregulation. It causes people to act in ways that don't seem quote unquote normal or like other people might respond. So we want to look at what is the effect of those on a client's cognitive processing, on their personal interactions, and in their own presentation of self, say at meetings with you or meetings with CYFD or meetings in a courtroom. How does one present oneself is a huge piece of how people think about what they want to do for that person sitting in front of them, I believe. So the goals today are: recognize that difficult to manage behaviors seen in some of our clients can require us, the professionals, to pull from our own emotional regulation skills to respond successfully. And our clients, as do all people, rely on defense mechanisms to protect themselves from perceived, though usually unconscious, psychological harm. Our goal as an advocacy team is not to strip clients of their unsuccessful tools, like cussing and swearing and calling judges bad names, but to increase and replace their protections. They see that as a protection for them to create a defense. We want to replace those with tools that will be more successful for them. So that's kind of the focus of the goal today. And even though many of the people at this presentation are not social workers, they're not client interveners in that sense, you all are client interveners. You all have clients that you talk to and interact with and wonder, what is it that I might say right now that will either make this worse or make this better? And so that's what we're doing today, right? Oops. All right. Very dainty. So there are multiple causes and multiple presentations of repeated patterns, embedded responses to a stress. So our clients that come to us in this program in particular are for the most part, those who are unsuccessful in getting their clients back, their children back within 6 months to a year, and I don't have the statistics down, and I'd like to sometime get that. Some of the actual statistics of length of time in the program from getting to receiving child or things like that, because that would make it a little more knowledgeable in terms of some of this data. But they are not people who are capable on their own, for the most part, of doing the things necessary to receive their children back, or we wouldn't have had to create this program. There wouldn't be the backlog in the system. So the chronic inability to use self-control over internal chaos and pressures, whether it's internal, which is psychological and developmental, or mental health issues, addictions, or whether it's external, which is the social environmental causes. This inability to control the internal chaos appears to providers, appears to the people that they're engaging with, the client is engaging with, as over or under reactive, as aggressive, and it's confusing. It confuses us who may be in a place of, I have my best heart is here, and I don't understand why this client's doing what they're doing. So that these behaviors can be looked at as symptoms, though not all symptoms mean that there's a mental health issue involved. A person may have have just had a car accident on the way, and it wasn't enough to cause them to go to the hospital, but they're discombobulated and they can't concentrate, and they're easily testy, they're a little angry. That is not symptomatic of a mental health issue. It's a life presentation. So we have to be careful that everything we see that looks off isn't necessarily labeled as a mental health or an addictive process. That anxiety, depression, thought disorders, attention deficit disorders, borderline personality disorders, post-traumatic stress disorders can show, even though they may have all different ways of development, of becoming a problem, they can show their problem in the same way. Or our clients may be showing these behaviors, these reactions because of feelings of shame, which I see as their vulnerability and sense of weakness is provoking a sense of internal humiliation, shame, hopelessness and helplessness. Or they may well indeed have personality disorders, in which case that is a whole nother level of what we can do for those particular clients. Now, are we taking questions at the end, or at the end? That's preferable. Well, I'm happy to have clients questions in between, because I know I tend to go through a lot of material fast, because I know this is a short amount of time. But this is something then that you'll have that you can read and reread, and then ask me questions another time through email, or in fact, when I start to work as the actual clinical consultant, this information will be probably a part of what we talk about quite a bit, I'm assuming. All right, so not going to go too much into emotional dysregulation, because I talked about that a little bit more in length last time. But there's, if you Wikipedia, though, is never a permanent, everything on this must be true. There is some good information available, and they do a good job of checking their sources. And we'll tell you at the end, this is fact checked, this is not, this is questionable science, blah, blah, blah. So it's not a bad place to go to start to look at some information. And so if you just go in and Google emotional dysregulation in Wikipedia, this is what you get. So these are called externalizing behaviors. Externalizing behavior is something you can see. Like if I'm sitting here and I'm worried about my taxes, and I'm just kind of, my mind is going blah blah, internally, you can't see that. That's internal. So external is I'm grouchy, I'm punching, I'm stealing. That's external. I'm stealing Caitlin's candy. Possible manifestations, showing extreme emotions more than you would expect in any given situation. Difficulty recognizing that the clients cannot see their own emotional cues and reactions. They might not be able to tell that they're yelling. They can't tell that they're causing a big commotion around them. I think about Mr. Magoo when I think of that. Focusing only on negative aspects of a situation, they may have had a meeting where 3 things went pretty well, but 2 things did not, and all they can think about is the 2 things that did not go well. And no matter how you try to shape that differently, they're focused on, and maybe those 2 things were more important to them than the other things that happened. So they just use it, well, gosh, can't you see that something good happened? No, they can't see right now. They can become avoidant or aggressive when they're dealing with their own negative emotions. They might just destroy things, throw things, become aggressive towards another person or themselves. A lot of verbal outbursts and threats, which I know, just from the discussions of the work that is part of this program, happens a lot in meetings. Whether it's towards CYFD workers, their own social workers, I suppose lawyers and judges, receive a lot of these externalized behaviors. So it's very difficult for them to focus on their attention at the moment to what is being right now. No, we're not talking about that right now, John. We're talking about this. All John keeps doing is pushing to the other thing that seems more important to him. Impulsive and difficulty calming, even after the upset's over, they can't come back. They can't re-regulate themselves to a more normal state. And a lot of these kinds of reactions can show from in a second to minutes to hours after the precipitating event happens. That response may happen immediately or quite a while after. So some of the things that are also in our client world, these are not uncommon things that we see. Early psychological trauma, brain injury, chronic maltreatment as a child, the psychiatric disorders such as severe anxiety or depression, reactive attachment disorder, attention deficit with hyperactivity, the autism spectrum, bipolar disorder, borderline personality, and complex post-traumatic stress disorder, as well as fetal alcohol syndrome. And I think I'm sure that if you go through your client list in your head, you probably can see half of these you could check as, oh yes, my client, I think, might have this. So there are a couple, there's not a lot of science, being that I have a science background, I'm always interested in the science of, well, how does it affect, why does that affect emotional regulation? And that has to do with the frontal lobe and the amygdala of the brain, which part of the brain was injured or didn't get enough nutrition. But there's some discussion about that the front cortex is at fault in a lot of these ways in which people cannot come back after being elevated past a certain point of regulation. They've lost the ability to pull it back with thought. How many of us have to go through our, okay, this isn't a good time for you to do this. You can be angry later. I think I'll calm down now. I might lose my license, blah, 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 blah. So we have this capacity to understand and see. That's the emotional cue, is I can see myself. I can get above myself. My meta examination of me right now will tell me this is going well or this is not going well. Our clients can mostly not do that. What I'd like to get to in a minute here, and we're heading in that direction, is, okay, so those of us in the program who are not mental health clinicians, and even when you are a mental health clinician, like I said, you might work with somebody for a really long time until you can be absolutely swear to a judge clear on what is the diagnosis right now, right in this client, because of all the things we've been talking about, the variety of symptomatology, the variety of causative effects. Diagnosing is not an easy thing. It's easy to be cavalier about it and say, oh yeah, that's another borderline personality. Yeah. You get that a lot sometimes in meetings when people are difficult, emotionally difficult, or are angry at you for nothing you ever did. There's a lot of our frustration as professionals can target sometimes upset at clients that isn't fair and can be damaging. So I put these 3 specific ways in which the emotional dysregulation shows in different diagnoses, because these are very common in worlds of the chaotic world of many people that we work with. So attention deficit. All right, so it isn't officially part of the DSM list for looking into attention deficit. But when a person has a very powerful, strong attention deficit disorder, especially even if it's just the thought, without hyperactivity, it's just in their mind, their head is, my husband has horrible attention deficit. With his brain is like fireworks all the time. It's fired, everything is all at once in his head. But he's just sitting there quietly. You'd never think he was like, in the 4th of July party. And it's not a party for the person who's in the presence of a person like that. So when that person is trying to cope with too many thoughts, too much energy, they can't focus, it's an impulsive thing, especially if you include hyperactivity in there, it's pretty natural they're going to have problems regulating their emotion because they are on a roller coaster, or maybe not a roller coaster, maybe a merry-go-round, if you can find the analogy that works. But they are bombarded with internal messaging, and they can't finish a thought or give you an answer because you've just asked them 3 more questions, especially if you're in a busy meeting, if you're in a fast meeting, lots of information has to come through. This person may be processing very slowly, and it may be ADD. That could also be intellectual impairment. Why they're processing slowly? Many things could be part of that. PTSD, a brain injury. So, but they are trying to give you an answer, but they can't get the answer out because there's 5 things shoved it now out of the way, and now I got to move to the next one. They're going to be angry and probably impulsive and frustrated. The next one is borderline personality. You're going to keep track of the time, right? When I have, what do we have here? I'm almost done? Okay, good. Borderline personality disorder is a mental health condition that's thought to come from very negative, highly unpredictable, highly inadequate, and perhaps at times very abusive attachment development. So the disorder is characterized by emotional dysregulation seen by mood swings, impulsive behavior, difficult and frequently disruptive relationships, whether with family, friends, coworkers, their bosses. It can lead to self-harm, suicide. It's extremely frightening to be in the presence of a person who is and has uncontrolled bipolar disorder, because they're not responding to sensible information. So post-traumatic stress disorder, with the post-traumatic stress disorder that comes from serious, life-threatening, the fear of and expectation of pending death. We're not just talking about dog bites, unless you're 5 and the dog is a Great Dane, or even, it doesn't even have to be necessarily size related, but PTSD that comes from deep fear, death-fearing trauma. Even sounds, sights, certain people, things people say, the little phrases people say can trigger symptomatology in their need to avoid what's going on. That's what PTSD sort of is. Is avoiding the triggers that they may not even be aware that they have. Hard time sleeping, startling easy, angry outbursts, constantly on edge, and it can't regulate emotions when that's where you're living. Those are also extremely difficult to manage in meetings, because meetings for the most part, even coming to this meeting, doing this causes me a little like, oh, this is exciting. Well, what if I don't do so good? Oh, okay, that's okay. I know what I'm doing. I'm going. It's going to be fun. And that's how I'm not about to lose my child. I'm not in a meeting of the level of intensity that our clients are all the time. And so the on edge, the easily angered, the outbursts, the fidgeting, those are hard to manage in a meeting when the people around want to get something accomplished. And it doesn't make the client present well. We talked earlier about presentation of our presentation of self in meetings it's like, what is that? First impressions, basically. It's a sort of an ongoing, repeated first impression at a meeting when it's your worst possible day. I was going to go on a bunny trail, but I won't because I don't have time. But sometime you may hear about the story of my first meeting with a client and women, long groom skirt, bathroom, toilet paper. We're just leave it at that. And you know what I'm talking about. So, and an angry 16-year-old girl. So post-traumatic stress disorder, I'm going to move on. I've had enough. We have enough to do. But those are ways to kind of think about the inside of somebody sitting in front of you. Now so what I want to talk about right now are the things that are in bold, because this was from last slide. Now I want to talk about us, because the us inside our client interaction is where we live in terms of our success or not success. Because one of the things that I talk a lot about with students and even clients is success is not measured in an outcome. It's measured in a process. Did I do the right thing? Did I proceed well? Did I proceed with my professional code of ethics in my mind? Did the outcome go well? No. Nope, isn't what I'd hoped, isn't what the client hoped, but I know that my process and my relationship was in keeping with what I know is ultimately the best way to proceed with a client, because any one given outcome does not make a client relationship. Behavior that's extremely hard to stop. So these are the people that come to us with whatever the reason, whatever the cause, they have behavior that's extremely hard to stop, even when they know it's harming people. and they're trying they're trying sincere best to resist it or reduce the behavior. They're not cavalier. They're not like, oh, I don't care. Because those people who truly don't care, you're really not going to be likely to be successful in your goal with them anyway in the program. Long histories of being judged and criticized for being lazy, selfish, weak, character flawed, for repeating this behavior. They are told to their face, but you're just a lazy, you know what, or I'm done with you. You're just being selfish. You're not thinking about the people around you. This is their lifelong message. So when you say to your client, I waited for you for 10 minutes and you didn't come, and I got a lot of other things to do. Well, what are they hearing? They're hearing this. They're not hearing a regard for, we'll try again is the only way that works. So it makes building rapport difficult because they are not people who are easy to forgive, to even sometimes be liked. It's what countertransference is. My feelings about that client cause me to think things, do things, say things. And that is how we're going to end our session today, is looking at what are we doing to make not worse an engagement with a client. We can't even always make it better, but we sure can make it worse. All right, so how we engage with clients who are acting out. Three important truths. Those are the ones I just said. That behavior is, they are sincerely trying to not do this. They sincerely understand what they're doing and the pain it's causing. And their endless history of being judged and labeled as no good and stupid and character flawed. And this truth we cannot deny, that we are faced with many clients in our lives who are difficult to help and difficult to even be present with because of their manifestations of behavior and how it triggers us. Because how it triggers us is about our inner world. And we, for the most part, we live in a world as when we reach, we're a level of success, we have a level of education, our emotional tool set is perhaps bigger, wider, and more diverse than our clients is. Our job is to make sure that we are pulling from the best part of our tool chest when we get to a client you're using the worst part of their tool chest. This is very hard to match it. 5 minutes, perfect. All right, so these are the things that we want to avoid. We don't want to avoid shaming clients through negative evaluations. We want to evaluate a choice, not the client's personality or the character. Instead of, Mary, that was really selfish what you did. Okay, that's pretty much evaluation of character. Evaluation of choice is usually it engages the client to help evaluate. Mary, I'm wondering, could you tell me there are 3 things that maybe that could have happened and how you chose the choice that you did and how did you think that went? That is a much longer process than Mary, you're selfish, but it's the process we have to take if we're going to help our clients move eventually to being a better individual and a better parent. And sometimes we can't get it done fast enough for the benefit of our child because people cannot be bullied, coerced, or forced into being better and different. I could put them in jail. I could threaten them with this thing that could happen, and for a short time, that client may act better. But that kind of change isn't change. That's just, I'm going to hold the line for a minute, and then I'm going to go back when no one's looking. So we don't want to surrender to hopelessness with our clients. The client's ultimate goal may not be supportable or obtainable, but some goal somewhere is. Obviously, that what they want is kids back. These are exaggerations, but kids back is my goal. Kids back is my goal. That's it. That's my goal. But in fact, there might be goal of cleaner house. Goal might be less dogs in the backyard. Goal might be some food in the refrigerator that isn't gummy bears. So there are goals that we can work with clients. And I realize as the social worker, these are social work goals, but they do ultimately affect the goals of lawyers and judges because it makes them be effective and successful parents. We don't want to increase helplessness. Clients need to see themselves as directors of their lives, even when the picture looks grim. We have to provide clients with knowledge of their smallest actions, of acknowledgments of their smallest actions, even if they're still so far from the choices that will get their kids back. They have to feel some empowerment to be able to make the next step. Many clients can't engage in a framework which will allow them to have their child back. As I said, we cannot, as providers, cajole, criticize, threaten, blame, argue. As I said, any of those may have momentary effectiveness if the person has enough emotional tool present to say, oh, I better shut up now and say, That's good, but that won't last. That is not how change works. Personality disorders are all of the above times a million. Personality disordered kind of a parent is a condition of change that, if you're really going to look at it clinically, can take years of weekly years. And even then, personality change is pretty hard drive. So at the end here, what I want is, we're not going to go into this at length because there are 15, I have 15 different defense mechanisms, and I want you to, on your own, take this and look at it and find your best tools and your worst tools for how we defend ourselves. But let me just say that, so as I said earlier, the clients are defending themselves against blows to their self-esteem. That's often why you're going to cuss out a judge, because the judge said something that made you feel like they don't think that you're worth anything, and so I'm going to let that judge know that neither is the judge. Okay, that's a defense mechanism to keep that embarrassment away from me and throw it over there. So the defense mechanism or manner in which a person behaves or thinks in certain ways to better protect or defend your inner self, your personality, and your self-image. Defense mechanisms are one way of looking at how people distance themselves from a full awareness of unpleasant thoughts, feelings, and behaviors. We all do it. We all do. We have to, or we wouldn't exist. We wouldn't be able to function. Psychologists have categorized defense mechanisms based on how primitive they are. The more primitive a defense mechanism, the less effective it works for a person over a long time. So, however, more primitive defense mechanisms are usually, they're effective short term. Like, you might be able to close out a meeting you didn't want because you were just such a, awful person that everybody said and done. Meeting ended. Oh, yay! But it didn't produce any effective change for you. So they're very short term, and so they're favored by people and children especially. When we start to learn defense mechanisms, they're all primitive. They're initially all primitive based on psychological cognitive development. And adults who don't learn better ways and more advanced ways will often never get past the primitive defense toolbox, which are things like, I'm just going to stay here and I'm going to let you move on to your own on the medium level where there's some primitiveness, but they're moving towards advanced, and then more advanced ones like sublimation and humor. And, there are ways to have defense which are not offensive. So denial, no, I didn't do that. Nope, I didn't do that. Nope. They'll never be able to say anything other than, nope, I didn't do that. And so these are the ones that you'll see with your clients most often when they are on very low functioning capacity. Denial, regression, acting out, dissociation and compartmentalization, projection and reaction formation. There are more defenses that are primitive than there are ones that are advanced. So I'm going to stop here because there's a lot of material in there, real juicy and kind of fun for you. If you haven't done it before, you got to do it. Find your own, see what works, see how many primitive ones you can come up with when you're fighting with somebody that you love. because we do resort when we are emotionally when we're emotionally distraught or engaged in family or things that are very deeply rooted inside our core sense of selves, we go to the defensive, we go to the primitive box right away. That's just, and then you got to remember, oh yeah, I'm a grown up. Okay. All right, so I guess that's it for me.
Thank you. So we'd like to go ahead and open it up for questions. First, I'd just like to remind anybody who has not entered their name and role and email address into the chat, if you could please do that. That's part of how we keep track of who was present. So if you haven't done that. Also, as we enter into the question and answer time, if you have a camera and can turn it on, we'd really appreciate it if you could, because it makes it easier for us to then know if you have a question or comment that you would like to put forth. You can also put questions into the chat, and then Jen will let me know, and we'll let you then ask that question. Let's see. And if you could also please remember when you are called on to please introduce yourself and let us and let the group know who you are. So, any questions out there so far for Susan? Right now you're sharing. Right. Okay. So yeah, we can stop the share of this while we go to questions. Any questions? Does anybody have any questions? No?
A lot of material presented fast.
It's a
So
lot.
you'll have one tomorrow, I bet.
So I actually had somebody submit some written questions, so we can use those to get started. And one of them, the first question was, what are the minimum requirements for an adequate psychological evaluation? So what should we be looking for at a minimum to say whether this is an adequate psychological evaluation or not of a client? Or if we need to go back and say, you know, this client needs, you know, whatever.
Okay, well, that's off the track, but I can pull that back a little bit. So, as I said, because actual, dependably accurate diagnoses themselves are elusive. I guess what I would look for in an evaluation is how many times was the client seen. First, what is the goal for the evaluation should be clarified. Who's the giver? Who's going to be getting this evaluation? Because I believe that sometimes evaluations are targeted towards whoever is going to be getting it. Is it a judge? Is it another therapist? Is it whoever? Differential diagnoses that are included in the assessment, because as I said, so many kinds of symptomatology can look like other kinds of things. To say this is the one it is a pretty big leap of faith, I would say. So I think a person who's evaluating needs to have differential diagnoses. What other one? Here's the 4 things I believe this could be. This is why I've eliminated these 3. This is the one I have. Or gosh, really, you know, I think we would need to have more information to make sure that we've eliminated what we need to eliminate. And so I think rather than just a collection of information from a client, I also do think that there should be some people who else know the client that should be part of the evaluation. That's not always possible to do, but I do think you get other pictures and you get conflicting information that way. It's always good to get because life has many sides to it. So anyway, that's what I was.
There are more questions about psychological evaluations, but she also had a question that I think is more on point for what you were talking about, which is how can we help judges understand that mental illness may prevent typical participation in the court proceeding and not just be rudeness?
Yeah.
So the stuff that you
all
were
that,
talking
all
about.
that.
So how do we do that?
Yeah.
How do we help
in
judges,
right?
Right. How do we help judges, or even when we're in meetings with CYFD
right.
or?
Well, okay. we talked a little bit about this last time that I was here, and we talked about having the people who are the biggest stakeholders in this whole process be able to have meetings here and there. And this is a format, but not the right format here, to have those kinds of things answered in a safe place where people can be a little bit more like, this person just makes me crazy. I don't know how else I can deal with this person. You want to, I think, you want to be able to, whether it's a meeting, I don't know that it's effective necessarily right when it's happening in front of you, because that the client's present. I'm not sure that that's the best place to do this, but to take a synopsis of what was just presented about how people are defending themselves from the only toolbox they have to defend themselves. And that me, like whoever the other professional is who's not knowing how to deal with them, is, first of all, there's nothing we can do in the moment to make that not happen. In the moment, there's nothing that can be done except to say, if you're not able to take a minute, calm down, at some point a meeting can't go on. I mean, I think meetings are canceled all the time for unruly behavior, I suppose. I don't know what else would you use. But I think it's a matter of reminding the professionals involved that the things we said about they know that they're causing harm, that it is such an integral part of who they've become, they can't stop just on a moment. That's why it takes time. That's why the social workers in this program are spending all the time that they have with keeping an honest regard for the client's dignity, even when there are choices being made that aren't going to be successful. The client has to be seen to work through how does it get successful, not just stop right now. I mean, I think that's a
But
fair
I think
question.
a lot of times because if we've already worked with the client some,
Right, right. Yeah,
except for maybe the first hearing, we have
Mhm.
worked with the client some. And so we kind of have an idea about
Well,
some of the behaviors that might
right.
come up.
And pretty much do they?
Well,
Most of the time. Yeah. Okay. All right.
I mean, sometimes they do. I mean, not
Right.
always, but
Right.
often they do.
Depending on how.
Christy, did you have something you wanted to say?
I am unmuted now. Can you hear me?
Can't
Christy?
hear you.
I can't hear you.
We're working on it.
So I'm unmuted. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay, so I wanted to add to that because I think that's a good question. And what I think what's most helpful in that, what I've seen in the 5 years that we've done this, is really at the end of the day, once you have that first meeting with your client or second meeting and you kind of experience some of those behaviors that manifest themselves when you're in, especially when you're in court or when you're in CYFD meetings, is you have to do a lot of pre-work at that stage. And yes, it's going to take more time on the part of a social worker if you have one, or just on the part of the attorney if that's your client, right? You have to spend the time, put the time in to do some pre-work with your client and practice and do some role play about, look, this is the setting that we're going to be in, right? That the way that you sit up, the way that you sigh, the way that you slouch, right? The way that you roll your eyes, the way that you how loudly you say, that's not fair, that's ridiculous, right? Means something, and it says something to everybody else at the table. It says something to the judge who ultimately has the decision. It says something to the prosecuting attorney. It says something to your CYFD workers. It says something to the other defense counsel who may be representing the other parent that you don't want your children to go to. You want them home with you. So it's really spending the time to do that pre-work and practicing. And we've done a lot of that work in saying something. Okay, so you know what? I'm gonna say some hard things to you, and right, and the immediate reaction will be, well, I guess I'm just not a good parent then. Nope, that was too soon. Let's talk about that, right? That's not. You have to be able to like hold that for a little bit, and we're gonna go out after this, and we're gonna have those conversations about how angry you are, and you didn't think that was fair. But I really want to stress this is all about how much pre-work you can put in with your client before you walk into that FCM and before you walk into that court hearing. And 10 minutes beforehand is not good enough. I really do want to stress that. If you want to see that change in your client to be able to help manage their behavior, you have to help them do that, and you got to put the time in.
Thank
Because again, the client cannot really themselves see that without you modeling that in those role plays.
Can I say something to that as well? And also
really quick.
acknowledging the fact that they are making progress as far as being aware of their attitudes and their demeanor. Even if it's just staying quiet during a court date, you know, they may have usually had outbursts and jump up and walk out. Maybe they were rolling their eyes, but at that court date, they didn't say anything. Acknowledge that. So that will uplift them. And so the next court date, they're aware of their body language and their demeanor, like, hey, I did a good job last time. I'm going to try this time.
Thank you. Thanks, everyone. We are now going to move on to the next segment of our session, which is our case-based learning. And Nita Day has submitted a case for presentation and review. So at this time, we are going to ask that that any judicial officers, any CYFD people, and counsel that happen to be on this case with Nita, which is Will Grigg, if you could please excuse yourselves for this portion of the presentation, because we are going to have a case presentation. So if we could have you all excuse yourselves, and then we will move on to the case presentation. Again, just a reminder, as we're doing the case presentation and as Nita's presenting her case, you can make comments or put questions in the chat. And also, again, if you have a camera, please turn it on so that we can see your questions. So, are you ready? So, so Nita has submitted a case for us. And essentially, Nita is asking for recommendations on strategies to argue for a plan of reunification for a parent where the reason for custody was domestic violence, but the department is using the parent's developmental delay as a reason the children can't be reunified with the parent. So I will put Nita's case up on the, I will share it with you all, but if you want to go ahead and get started.
So this is a really old case. It's from 2016. And you know what, before we actually progress, there's a couple people who are on the phone lines, and I'd like to know who those people are.
Okay, so Justice Myers was the 984-0329, and she has hung up. And then the rest is, that's it. Everybody else, so there's Renee Richards Charney's and it's.
Okay, yeah, no, that's fine. I just saw a few of the phone numbers, and this is the kind of one of those cases